Nathan Cole had almost kept walking. He was halfway past the corner deli on West 83rd when the sound behind him shifted. Louder first, then something sharper underneath it. Not loud enough to stop the crowd, just loud enough to make him slow down without meaning to. Three young men stood too close to a woman near the curb. One leaned into her space, saying something Nathan couldn't fully hear. The woman's shoulders had gone tight. Her hand gripped the strap of her bag like it was the only solid thing in the moment. People passed them. Phones out, heads down, bags swinging. Nathan watched for a second longer than he wanted to. Then he felt that quiet pressure in his chest, the one that always came when walking away would be easier. He turned back. Nathan stood there a second longer than he meant to. Not frozen, just suspended. The sidewalk kept moving around him. Manhattan had that rhythm, people slipping past one another without touching, like water finding space. Someone brushed his shoulder and muttered a quick apology without looking up. A cab horn sounded from the avenue. Somewhere behind him, a subway grate rattled when a train passed underneath. Normal noise. Normal night. But that small pocket near the curb stayed wrong. The woman had shifted half a step away from the men. It wasn't dramatic. If someone glanced quickly, they might have thought they were just talking. But Nathan noticed the angle of her shoulders, the way her chin dipped when one of them leaned closer. He'd seen that posture before. Years ago in a gym in Queens where he trained 3 nights a week after work, women came in sometimes for self-defense classes. Same posture, tight shoulders, calculating distance. The tall one of the three laughed again. "Come on," he said. "Why you acting like that?" His voice carried just enough that Nathan could hear it clearly now. The woman said something Nathan couldn't catch. One of the others stepped sideways, cutting off the path behind her. That was the moment Nathan felt the shift inside himself. It was quiet. Not anger. More like a small door closing. He checked a street out of habit. Traffic rolling. People walking. No one slowing down. A couple passed by close enough to hear everything, but they kept moving. Nathan rubbed his thumb across the seam of the grocery bag in his hand. Apples inside, pasta, a jar of sauce. Dinner for 2. His daughter would be waiting. He could already picture the apartment kitchen light on when he got back. The way Emily liked to sit at the counter with her homework spread everywhere, pretending she wasn't watching the door. Nathan looked back at the group. The tall one had moved closer again. Too close. Nathan let out a slow breath. Then he stepped toward them. Not fast, not aggressive, just direct. Each step made the scene clearer. The woman's face came into focus first, early 30s maybe. Dark hair pulled back loosely. Her eyes flicked toward Nathan for half a second, then away again. She wasn't asking for help. But she wasn't relaxed either. The 3 men noticed him when he got within a few feet. The tallest one turned first. "What's up?" Nathan stalked an arm's length away, close enough to be part of the circle now. Up close, they looked younger than Nathan expected. Early 20s maybe. Athletic jackets, sneakers too clean for the weather. Kids almost. Nathan kept his voice level. "She's trying to leave." The tall one squinted slightly. "Excuse me?" Nathan nodded toward the sidewalk behind them. "Let her go." The other 2 exchanged a look. The shortest one gave a small laugh under his breath. "Oh," he said. "You her dad or something?" Nathan didn't react to that. He kept his posture easy, hands relaxed at his sides, grocery bag hanging loosely from one finger. He'd learned a long time ago that tension spreads faster than words. The tall one stepped closer. Not enough to touch, just enough to test distance. "She didn't say she needed help," he said. Nathan glanced at the woman. She still hadn't spoken. Her eyes moved between them now. Nathan returned his attention to the man in front of him. She shouldn't have to. A car rolled past slowly. Headlights swept over the group for a moment, and then moved on. For a second the street felt strangely quiet. The tall one smirked. "You some kind of hero?" Nathan shook his head. "No." Then he nodded once toward the open sidewalk. "But you're done here." One of the men behind him muttered something Nathan couldn't catch. The tall one's smirk faded slightly. There it was. That small shift Nathan had expected. Some people back down when the moment changes. Others feel challenged. The tall one fell into the second group. He tilted his head. You telling us what to do? Nathan adjusted the grocery bag in his hand and placed it gently on the ground beside his shoe. He did it casually, but the movement didn't go unnoticed. The shortest one raised an eyebrow. Oh, he said softly. Nathan straightened. Still calm, still quiet. I'm asking you to move. For a moment no one spoke. Nathan could hear a bicycle approaching behind him. The soft clicking of gears as someone coasted past. Life continuing around them. The tall one looked Nathan up and down now, really studying him. Nathan knew what he saw. A man in his 40s. Simple jacket, no visible tension, no raised voice, not threatening. That miscalculation happened often. The tall one chuckled. You should keep walking, man. Nathan didn't answer. A long second passed, then another. The woman shifted again, her foot edging slightly toward the open space Nathan had created beside him. The tall one noticed that too. His expression hardened. Nah, he said quietly. Then he stepped closer again, this time into Nathan's space. The smell of cheap cologne and cigarette smoke drifted across. Nathan didn't move. He felt the familiar awareness spreading through his body now. Not adrenaline exactly. Something steadier. Distance. Angles. Hands. The tall one leaned forward. You think you're tough or something? Nathan met his eyes. No. His voice stayed soft. I just think you should leave. Behind the tall one, the shortest man laughed again, but it sounded thinner now. The third man had stopped smiling completely. Nathan saw the moment coming before it happened. It always arrived the same way. A slight tightening of the jaw, a shoulder shifting. The tall one's hand moved. Not a punch, just a shove, but it was enough. Enough to turn the quiet street corner into something else entirely. Nathan let the push carry through his body instead of resisting it. His feet adjusted automatically. The grocery bag rustled softly on the ground beside him. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a calm thought surfaced. Emily would hate if I came home bleeding. Nathan exhaled slowly. Then he looked at the young man in front of him again. The night had changed. And now, there was no simple way out of it. The shove wasn't hard, more insult than attack. Nathan felt the pressure in his chest, the brief shift of balance, the rubber sole of his shoe sliding half an inch against the concrete. His body adjusted without thought. Years of repetition in quiet gyms had carved those reactions deep. He didn't step back. He simply settled again. For a moment, the tall man seemed unsure what to do with that. Nathan watched his hands. That mattered more than his face. Hands told the truth. Behind him, the woman Rachel, though Nathan didn't know her name yet, took another small step sideways. It wasn't dramatic, just enough to create space between herself and the three men. Nathan noticed. The tall one noticed too. His irritation sharpened. You deaf? He said. I told you to keep walking. Nathan didn't answer right away. A man pushing a stroller slowed briefly on the opposite sidewalk. He looked across the street, reading the tension the way people do in cities. His eyes lingered for 2 seconds, maybe 3. Then he moved on. Nathan had seen that look before, too. Not my problem. He turned his attention back to the man in front of him. You pushed me, Nathan said quietly. The tall one shrugged. Yeah. Nathan nodded once. That wasn't necessary. The shortest of the three snorted. Oh my God, he said. Listen to this guy. Nathan ignored him. He was still watching the tall one's shoulders, the set of them, the way his weight shifted slightly onto his front foot. The young man thought he was intimidating someone. That belief had momentum now, and momentum was dangerous. Nathan kept his tone even. You should go. The tall one leaned forward again. Or what? Nathan paused. It wasn't a theatrical pause. He was thinking. He had learned long ago that the next few seconds in moments like this mattered more than anything that came after. Words could still end it. Sometimes. You don't want this, Nathan said finally. The tall one's eyebrows rose. Listen to him, the shortest one said again. You threatening us now? Nathan shook his head. No. Then he glanced toward the woman again, making sure she still had space. Her breathing looked shallow. She held her bag close to her body. Nathan returned his gaze to the tall one. I'm telling you this can end right now. The tall one laughed once. Short, sharp. Then his hand shot out again, this time faster. He grabbed Nathan's jacket collar and pulled. The movement was sudden enough that someone passing nearby gasped softly. Nathan felt the fabric tighten around his throat. He also felt the imbalance it created in the young man's stance. Right foot forward, weight too far over the knee. A small mistake. Nathan moved, not quickly, just precisely. His hand rose and pressed against the man's wrist, not striking, just guiding the angle downward. At the same time, Nathan stepped half a turn sideways, rotating his body out of the line of force. The young man's grip loosened automatically when his wrist bent the wrong way. Nathan didn't yank or twist. He simply redirected. The tall one stumbled a step forward, forced to release the jacket to catch himself. To anyone watching quickly, it barely looked like anything had happened. But the change in the air was immediate. The shortest one blinked. What? Nathan had already stepped back into his original position. Hands relaxed again. The tall man straightened slowly. His expression had shifted now. Confusion first, then embarrassment. Nathan had seen that look many times in training partners. The moment when someone realizes their assumption about a situation was wrong. The problem was that embarrassment often turned into anger, and anger erased judgment. The third man, quiet until now, spoke for the first time. "Yo," he said, low. But the tall one ignored him. His face darkened. "You think that's funny?" Nathan sighed softly. "No." He bent down briefly, picked up his grocery bag and set it on a nearby bench a few feet away. Out of the way. When he turned back, the tall one was already moving. This time, the punch came. Fast. Wild. Nathan saw it early. The shoulder telegraphed it. The elbow flared too wide. Nathan stepped inside the arc before the fist finished traveling. His left hand rose, redirecting the punch just enough that it slid past his shoulder. At the same moment, his right palm pressed lightly against the young man's chest. Not a strike, just structure. But with the man's forward momentum, it was enough. The tall one stumbled backward 3 steps and nearly lost his balance. The shortest one cursed under his breath. What the hell? Nathan didn't pursue. Didn't advance. He simply stayed where he was, still, breathing steady. That unsettled people more than aggression ever did. The tall one regained his footing, breathing harder now. For the first time, uncertainty appeared fully in his eyes. Nathan spoke again. "You're done." The quiet one finally stepped forward and touched his friend's shoulder. "Forget it," he muttered. But pride is a stubborn thing. The tall one shook him off. "Back up," he snapped. Then he looked at Nathan again, this time more carefully. Nathan could almost hear the calculation happening behind his eyes. Who is this guy? Nathan knew that question. He didn't answer it. The street around them had slowed now. People were watching openly. Someone stood across the avenue with a phone raised halfway, uncertain whether to record or walk away. Nathan ignored them all. His focus stayed on the 3 men, mostly the tall one. "Last chance," Nathan said quietly. The tall one's breathing slowed slightly. Something inside him had shifted, not defeat, but doubt. He glanced at his 2 friends. Neither looked eager anymore. Nathan waited. Silence stretched. Finally, the tall one spat onto the pavement beside Nathan's shoe. "Whatever," he muttered. But he didn't move yet. Nathan held his gaze, then he spoke one more time. "You owe her an apology." That landed differently. The tall one blinked. "What?" Nathan nodded toward the woman. "You bothered her." The shortest one scoffed. "Man, you serious?" Nathan didn't look at him. His attention stayed on the tall one. "Say you're sorry." The street seemed to lean inward around them. For a long moment the young man said nothing. Nathan waited. Not tense, just patient. Eventually the tall one looked toward the woman. His jaw tightened. Then he muttered something. Too quiet. Nathan tilted his head slightly. "Louder." The tall one clenched his teeth. Sorry. The word came out stiff and angry. But it came out. Nathan nodded once. That's enough. He stepped aside slightly, opening the path along the sidewalk. The three young men hesitated. Then the quiet one grabbed the tall man's sleeve. Let's go. This time he listened. They walked past Nathan, shoulders tight, footsteps heavy. No one spoke. The shortest one glanced back once, eyes narrow. Then they disappeared into the crowd. Just like that, the street exhaled. Traffic noise returned. Conversations resumed. Nathan stood there a moment longer, letting the tension drain slowly from his muscles. Then he turned toward the woman. Up close now, he saw the exhaustion behind her eyes. She had been holding her breath. Are you okay? Nathan asked. She nodded, though it looked delayed. Yes, she said. Her voice was steady but quiet. Nathan retrieved his grocery bag from the bench. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then she looked down the street where the men had gone. Thank you, she said. Nathan shrugged lightly. It's all right. But something in her posture told him the night still wasn't over. And when she glanced toward the dark stretch of sidewalk ahead, Nathan understood why. He shifted the grocery bag to his other hand. Where are you headed? She hesitated. Then she gestured down the block. Just a few streets. Nathan nodded. He considered the distance. Then he said quietly, I'll walk with you. They started walking without much discussion. Nathan fell half a step behind at first. Not intentionally. Just habit. He liked to see what was happening ahead and behind when the night still felt unsettled. The grocery bag rustled softly against his leg. For the first half block, neither of them spoke. The street had returned to its usual rhythm. A group of college students passed them laughing loudly about something on a phone screen. A delivery bike cut between two taxis and disappeared into traffic. Somewhere above, an apartment window slammed shut. Normal again. But Rachel's shoulders were still tight. Nathan noticed the way her eyes moved when footsteps approached from behind. He slowed slightly so they walked side by side. You live nearby? He asked. She nodded. 70th. Nathan did the distance in his head. 3 blocks. Maybe 4. Not far. Late to be out? She said after a moment. Glancing at the grocery bag, Nathan gave a small breath through his nose. Dinner run. She looked at the bag again. For you and my daughter. Rachel's eyebrows lifted slightly. Oh. Nathan adjusted his grip on the handles. She's 12, he added after a second. Rachel nodded slowly as if that explained something. They crossed the next intersection. The walk signal flashed white. A car rolled through the turn a little too quickly, and Nathan automatically placed a hand lightly on Rachel's elbow to guide her forward. The contact lasted less than a second, but she noticed. Thank you, she said again. Nathan shook his head. You're all right. They continued. The adrenaline from earlier had faded, but Nathan could still feel a faint vibration under his skin. Not fear, just the leftover alertness his body carried after conflict. It took time to settle. Rachel glanced back once over her shoulder. Nathan followed the look. Nothing unusual. Still, he understood the instinct. They won't come back, he said quietly. You seem very sure about that. Nathan shrugged. They were embarrassed. Rachel considered that, and that matters more than anger sometimes. She looked at him again, studying his face now. You do this often? Nathan almost laughed. No. But the word didn't carry much conviction. Rachel seemed to notice. You moved like someone who's done that before. Nathan watched the crosswalk signal change ahead of them. Years of explanation condensed into a simple answer. Training, he said. What kind? Martial arts. Rachel gave a small nod. That explains the calm part. Nathan didn't respond, because the calm wasn't something he liked to talk about. It wasn't calm exactly. It was familiarity. Conflict had patterns. Most people just didn't see them because they'd never had reason to look closely. They walked another block in silence. A dog barked somewhere down the street. The smell of someone cooking garlic drifted from an open restaurant door. Rachel spoke again. I almost yelled. Nathan looked over. At them? She shook her head. At everyone else? Nathan understood immediately. They both glanced briefly at the sidewalk behind them, remembering the crowd that had flowed around the moment earlier like water around a rock. Rachel sighed. I hate that feeling. What feeling? Like you're suddenly invisible. Nathan let that sit between them. He had felt the opposite of it many times, the uncomfortable awareness of being the only one who noticed something wrong. Neither position was pleasant. They reached another corner. The traffic light changed just as they arrived. Rachel waited beside Nathan. You didn't hesitate, she said quietly. Nathan stared at the red hand signal. That's not true. You did? I almost kept walking. Rachel turned toward him. Really? Nathan nodded once. Yeah. Why didn't you? The signal changed to white. They stepped into the crosswalk. Nathan didn't answer right away. A cab honked impatiently somewhere behind them. Finally, he said, My daughter walks home from school. Rachel watched his face. Nathan kept looking forward. She's about your height, he added after a moment. Rachel didn't speak for several steps. Then she said softly, So you pictured her. Nathan didn't confirm it, but he didn't deny it either. The block ahead was quieter now. Fewer people. Older brownstones with warm light glowing through narrow windows. Rachel slowed slightly. Next corner, she said. Nathan nodded. As they walked, the night air cooled the last traces of heat from his skin. His body was finally relaxing. But something else lingered. Not from the fight. From the moment before it, that small hesitation. Nathan had lived long enough to know those seconds mattered. Because the truth was simple. Most people weren't bad. They were just tired. Busy. Afraid of stepping into someone else's problem. Nathan understood that. He'd felt it himself more than once. Rachel spoke again. Do you ever worry about what could happen? Nathan glanced at her. You mean if it goes wrong? She nodded. Yes. Nathan thought about the tall young man's face when the first move didn't work the way he expected. That flash of anger. That possibility. I always worry about that, Nathan said. Rachel absorbed the answer slowly. They reached the final intersection before her street. She stopped. That building, she said, pointing down the block. Nathan followed her gesture. Warm yellow lights glowed from several windows. A quiet residential building. A small tree planted beside the entrance. Safe. Or at least safer. They began walking again. Rachel's voice softened. I keep thinking about what would have happened if you didn't stop. Nathan didn't answer. Because he had thought about it too. And the truth was, he didn't know. Sometimes nothing happened. Sometimes something worse did. Life turned on those tiny edges. They reached the building entrance. Rachel slowed. Nathan did the same. She turned toward him fully now. The tension in her posture finally easing. I don't even know your name, she said. Nathan. She nodded. Rachel. Nathan gave a small, polite nod in return. For a moment, they simply stood there under the soft light from the doorway. Then, Rachel looked at the grocery bag again. You probably have someone waiting for dinner. Nathan exhaled lightly. Yeah. Rachel smiled faintly. Well, thank you again, Nathan. Nathan shifted the bag slightly. It's all right. Rachel reached for the building door. Then she paused. There's one thing I still don't understand. Nathan waited. She looked at him carefully. You made them apologize. Nathan held her gaze. Yes. Rachel tilted her head slightly. Why? Nathan thought about the answer for a moment. Not the obvious one, the real one. Finally, he said quietly, because walking away shouldn't feel normal. Rachel studied him for another second. Then she nodded slowly. The door clicked open. But before she stepped inside, she asked one more question. Did you ever worry they might come back? Nathan considered the empty street behind them. Then he gave a small shrug. Maybe. Rachel raised an eyebrow. And that didn't bother you? Nathan's mouth twitched slightly. It did. Then he added, but some things bother me more. Rachel looked at him for a moment longer. Then she stepped into the building. The door closed gently behind her. Nathan stood there a few seconds, listening to the quiet street. Then he turned toward home and started walking again. Nathan walked for half a block before the quiet settled in fully. Not the city quiet. Manhattan never really went silent, but the kind that happens after tension drains out of a situation and the body slowly realizes it doesn't need to stay ready anymore. His shoulders loosened first, then his breathing slowed. The grocery bag bumped gently against his knee with each step. Pasta, sauce, apples. He pictured Emily again, sitting at the kitchen counter with her notebook open, pencil tapping against her cheek when she got stuck on a math problem. She liked to pretend she didn't need help anymore, but every few minutes she would glance toward him anyway. Nathan checked his watch. Later than he planned. He turned the corner toward Broadway, the wider street brighter with storefront lights and evening foot traffic. A couple walked past arguing quietly about directions. Someone inside a coffee shop laughed loudly enough to spill out onto the sidewalk. Normal sounds. Nathan blended back into the flow of people without effort. That was the strange thing about moments like the one earlier. They felt enormous while they were happening. Then they disappeared into the city almost immediately. No sirens, no police reports, just people continuing their evenings. Nathan reached another intersection and waited at the red light. Cars moved through in a steady line, headlights streaking across the pavement. He could still feel the shove from earlier in the fabric of his jacket, a memory in the cloth. He tugged the collar straight absently. A young man standing beside him glanced over. "You all right?" Nathan realized he had been staring at nothing. "Yeah," he said. The light changed. They crossed. Halfway through the block, Nathan slowed again, though he didn't mean to. His body had settled, but his mind hadn't caught up yet. That sometimes happened after confrontation. Thoughts arrived late. He replayed the moment the tall one grabbed his jacket, the exact angle of the wrist, the way the young man's balance tipped forward when Nathan turned. Small things. Nathan had spent years practicing movements that ended conflict without leaving damage behind. It had always mattered to him. Anyone could hurt someone. Control was harder. He passed a restaurant window and caught his reflection briefly in the glass. 43. Hair beginning to gray at the temples. Face calm. A stranger looking back. Nathan wondered what the three young men were doing now. Probably laughing about it somewhere. Or maybe they were quiet. Embarrassment sometimes lingered longer than people expected. Nathan hoped it did, because embarrassment could turn into reflection if someone let it. He kept walking. The streetlights shifted to a dimmer residential glow as he moved farther north. Brownstones lined the sidewalks, their stoops dark except for the occasional porch light. A taxi rolled past slowly. Nathan heard footsteps behind him and turned his head slightly. Just a jogger, he continued. The building where he and Emily lived came into view halfway down the block. Old brick, narrow entrance, the small brass numbers beside the door catching the streetlight. Home. Nathan felt the last bit of tension leave his chest when he saw it. He climbed the short steps and pulled the key from his pocket. The door opened with the familiar creak of old hinges. Inside, the lobby smelled faintly like cleaning solution and someone's takeout. The elevator light was off. Nathan pressed the button. While he waited, he shifted the grocery bag to his other hand. For a moment he stood still in the quiet hallway, and then he heard it. Footsteps running overhead. Fast, followed by a muffled voice. "Dad." Nathan smiled before he even looked up. The elevator arrived with a soft mechanical hum. He stepped inside and pressed the fourth floor. The doors slid closed. As the elevator climbed slowly, Nathan leaned his head briefly against the cool metal wall behind him. The events of the night passed through his mind again. Rachel's tight shoulders, the young man's fist missing his face by inches, the word sorry forced out through clenched teeth. Nathan didn't feel proud about it. He didn't feel heroic. Mostly, he felt tired, because stepping into those moments always left a strange aftertaste. Not fear, not satisfaction, something heavier. The elevator dinged. Fourth floor. The doors opened. Nathan stepped out. Emily was already standing in the hallway outside their apartment, barefoot, wearing one of his oversized t-shirts as a sleep shirt. Her hair was messy, her arms folded tightly across her chest. "You're late," she said. Nathan lifted the grocery bag. "Dinner." Her eyes softened immediately. "Oh, good." Then she looked closer at him, noticing things the way children do. "You okay?" Nathan nodded. "Yeah." Emily studied his face another second. Then she turned and walked into the apartment, holding the door open for him. Nathan stepped inside. The apartment was warm. Homework spread across the kitchen counter exactly the way he imagined. A math textbook open beside a half-finished glass of milk. Emily closed the door behind him. "What took so long?" she asked. Nathan set the grocery bag on the counter and began unpacking it slowly. "Just a small delay." Emily leaned against the counter watching him. "You always say that when something happened." Nathan paused with the jar of sauce in his hand. He glanced at her. "What makes you think something happened?" Emily shrugged. "You have that look." Nathan placed the jar on the counter. "What look?" She squinted at him thoughtfully. "The one where you're thinking about something but pretending you're not." Nathan exhaled softly. Kids notice more than adults like to believe. He turned toward the stove and filled a pot with water. "Someone needed help," he said finally. Emily's voice sharpened immediately. "What kind of help?" Nathan set the pot on the burner. "Just walking someone home." Emily processed that. "Like, they were scared?" Nathan nodded. "A little." Emily was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that made Nathan stop moving for a second. "Did you help them because of me?" Nathan turned slowly. Emily looked down at the floor now, suddenly shy about the question she'd asked. Nathan leaned against the counter. "Partly." Emily looked up again, her expression serious. "Would you want someone to do that for me?" Nathan didn't answer right away. He thought about the crowded sidewalk, the people who had walked past without stopping. Then he looked at his daughter. "Yes," he said quietly. Emily nodded, like that answer fit somewhere inside her. Then she pushed her math book toward him. "Good," she said, "because I need help with fractions." Nathan laughed softly. The water began to heat on the stove. Outside the apartment, the city continued its endless movement, but inside the small kitchen, the night felt steady again. Nathan pulled a chair beside Emily and picked up her pencil. For a while, the only conflict left in the room involved numbers on a page. Still, somewhere deep in his chest, the memory of that moment on the sidewalk stayed with him. Not the fight, not the tension, the hesitation. Before it, that small space where a person decided what kind of man he was going to be. Nathan knew those moments would come again someday. In this city, they always did, and each time, the decision would feel just as quiet, just as heavy. Nathan woke earlier than usual, not because of noise. The apartment was quiet. The street below hadn't filled with morning traffic yet. It was still that gray hour when the city takes a breath before starting again. He lay still for a moment, staring at the faint light on the ceiling. Sleep had come, but not deeply. Moments from the night before had surfaced in pieces. Rachel's tight grip on her bag, the young man's hand grabbing his jacket, Emily standing barefoot in the hallway asking if he was okay. Nothing dramatic, just fragments. Nathan sat up slowly. His shoulder felt a little stiff, probably from the sudden movement when the punch came. Nothing serious. He rolled it once, testing the joint, then swung his feet onto the floor. The apartment creaked the way old buildings do when someone moves through them early in the morning. In the kitchen, he poured water into the coffee maker and pressed the switch. The quiet hum filled the room. Nathan leaned both hands on the counter and looked out the window. Across the street, a bakery employee was lifting metal chairs onto the sidewalk for the day. The sky above the buildings was still pale. Ordinary morning. He appreciated that. The strange thing about physical conflict wasn't the moment itself. It was the echo afterward. Your body remembered things longer than your mind did. Nathan stretched his neck slowly and reached for a mug. Behind him, a soft voice spoke. "You're up early." Emily stood in the hallway, rubbing her eyes. Nathan turned. "So are you." She padded into the kitchen and climbed onto the stool at the counter. Her hair was even messier than the night before. Nathan poured coffee into his mug. "You thinking about yesterday?" she asked. Nathan raised an eyebrow. "You mean the fractions?" Emily gave him a flat look. "You know what I mean." Nathan took a small sip of coffee. Kids had a way of walking directly into conversations adults tried to step around. A little, he said. Emily studied him. Were you scared? Nathan thought about that. The moment on the sidewalk. The push. The punch. No, he said finally. Emily frowned. That's weird. Nathan smiled faintly. Why? Because I would be scared. Nathan sat on the stool beside her. That's normal. Emily rested her chin in her hands. So why weren't you? Nathan searched for the right way to explain it. He didn't want her thinking bravery meant feeling nothing. That kind of moment happens fast, he said slowly. You don't really have time to be scared until later. Emily absorbed that. Did it hurt? Nathan flexed his shoulder again. A little. She brightened immediately. Can I see? Nathan laughed softly. No. Emily groaned. You never show battle injuries. It wasn't a battle. She tilted her head. You threw someone, didn't you? Nathan sighed. Emily, what? You're making it sound like a movie. She grinned. Was it cool at least? Nathan shook his head. No. That answer surprised her. Why not? Nathan looked down at his coffee. Because it never felt cool. Because someone always ended up embarrassed or angry or hurt. Because conflict always meant something had already gone wrong. But he didn't say all that. Instead he said, it was just something that needed to stop. Emily nodded slowly. Then she slid off the stool. Well, she said, next time take a video. Nathan nearly choked on his coffee. Emily laughed and darted toward the bathroom before he could respond. Nathan shook his head. Kids. A few minutes later, he heard the shower start. Nathan finished his coffee and began packing Emily's lunch for school. Apple slices. Sandwich. A small chocolate bar she would pretend not to be excited about. The rhythm of the morning routine steadied him. By the time Emily reappeared dressed for school, the strange edge of the previous night had softened. Ready? Nathan asked. Emily grabbed her backpack. Yep. They left the apartment together and walked down the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator. The morning air outside was crisp. School was only a few blocks away. They walked side by side, Emily talking about a science project involving plant growth and sunlight. Nathan listened, asking small questions. Halfway down the second block, Emily stopped suddenly. Wait. Nathan looked down. What? Emily pointed across the street. Nathan followed her finger. A familiar figure stood near the corner coffee stand. Rachel. She was wearing a different coat this morning, holding a paper cup and speaking to the vendor. Emily looked at Nathan with wide eyes. Is that the lady? Nathan nodded. Rachel looked up at that moment and recognized him almost immediately. Her face lit with surprised recognition. Nathan gave a small wave. She walked across the street toward them. Good morning, she said. Morning, Nathan replied. Rachel glanced at Emily. And you must be the famous daughter? Emily blinked. Famous, Rachel smiled. Your dad mentioned you. Emily looked pleased with that. I'm Emily. Rachel nodded. Rachel. They stood for a moment on the corner while the city moved around them again. Rachel took a sip of her coffee. I was hoping I might see you again, she said to Nathan. Nathan raised an eyebrow slightly. Oh? Rachel nodded. I wanted to say thank you properly. Nathan shifted Emily's backpack strap on her shoulder. You already did. Rachel shook her head. Not really. She glanced at Emily again. Your dad handled something last night that most people would have ignored. Emily looked at Nathan. I knew it. Nathan sighed. Rachel laughed softly. I didn't mean to get you in trouble. You didn't, Nathan said. Emily crossed her arms. So what exactly happened? Nathan opened his mouth. Rachel beat him to it. 3 guys are being rude, she said simply. Emily looked unimpressed. That's it? Nathan nodded. That's it. Emily studied both of them. You're definitely leaving stuff out. Rachel chuckled. Maybe a little. A school bell rang faintly in the distance. Emily groaned. I have to go. Nathan nodded toward the school building. After school, we'll get ice cream. Emily brightened instantly. Deal. She turned to Rachel. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. Emily ran across the street toward the school entrance. Nathan and Rachel watched her go. Rachel smiled. She seems like a good kid. Nathan nodded. She is. They stood quietly for a second. Then Rachel said, I've been thinking about something you said last night. Nathan looked at her. What was that? That walking away shouldn't feel normal. Nathan remembered the moment. Rachel looked out at the busy street. I realized something after I got home. Nathan waited. Rachel turned back toward him. People weren't ignoring me because they didn't see what was happening. She paused. They were ignoring it because they didn't want to become part of it. Nathan didn't disagree. Rachel sighed. And you did. Nathan shrugged lightly. Rachel studied his face again. You make it sound simple. Nathan looked down the street where Emily had disappeared. It isn't. Rachel nodded slowly. Then she lifted her coffee cup slightly. Well, I'm glad you were there. Nathan gave a small nod. Rachel started to step back toward the coffee stand. But before she turned away, she said something else. You know, those guys weren't the scary part. Nathan looked at her. What was? Rachel held his gaze. The moment when nobody did anything. Nathan didn't answer. Because that part had stayed with him too. Rachel stayed on the corner a moment longer. The morning crowd moved around them in quick lines. People with coffee cups, headphones, briefcases, the usual current pulling everyone toward somewhere else. Nathan glanced once more toward the school entrance where Emily had disappeared. Rachel noticed. You're making sure she got inside. Nathan nodded. Habit. Rachel followed his gaze. She seems confident. Nathan gave a small breath through his nose. She is. But confidence is easy when the world hasn't tested it yet. Rachel didn't answer right away. They both watched a crossing guard guide a small group of kids across the street. After a moment, Rachel said quietly, I kept replaying it last night. Nathan looked at her. The sidewalk? She nodded. Every little detail. Nathan understood that part. The mind liked to rewind uncomfortable moments, searching for a different outcome. What did you notice? He asked. Rachel stared into her coffee cup for a second. How calm you were. Nathan shifted his weight slightly. That wasn't calm. Rachel raised an eyebrow. It looked like calm. Nathan considered how to explain it. Have you ever practiced something enough that your body just does it? Rachel thought about that. Like driving? Something like that. He glanced down at his hands. When people panic, they move fast but sloppy. Training teaches you to move slower than the moment feels. Rachel nodded slowly. So you were thinking the whole time? Nathan shook his head. Not really. That seemed to confuse her. You weren't thinking? Nathan tried again. More like recognizing. Rachel tilted her head. Recognizing what? Patterns. The word hung between them. Nathan could see she was curious now. He continued, though he usually didn't talk about it. When someone's about to throw a punch, their shoulder shifts first. Sometimes their foot moves. Their eyes change. Rachel blinked. You can actually see that? Nathan nodded. If you've watched it enough. Rachel took another sip of coffee, absorbing the idea. That sounds exhausting. Nathan smiled faintly. You get used to it. They stepped aside as a delivery worker pushed a cart past them toward a nearby restaurant. Rachel watched him disappear inside. Did you ever compete? She asked. Nathan shook his head. No, why not? Nathan shrugged. I didn't start training for competition. Rachel waited. Nathan looked out at the traffic before answering. I started because I was angry. Rachel's eyebrows lifted slightly. You? Nathan chuckled quietly. Long time ago. What happened? Nathan thought about the old gym in Queens, the smell of rubber mats, the heavy bags hanging from chains. I had a teacher who told me something once, he said. Rachel listened. He said strength isn't proven by what you can destroy. It's proven by what you can stop. Rachel smiled softly. That's a good teacher. Nathan nodded. He was. They stood quietly for a moment. Then Rachel's expression shifted slightly. There's something I've been wondering, she said. Nathan waited. What would you have done if they didn't stop? Nathan answered honestly. I don't know. Rachel studied his face. You really don't? Nathan shook his head. You can prepare for violence. You can't control it. Rachel seemed to appreciate the honesty. That's comforting in a strange way. Nathan raised an eyebrow. Why? Because it means you weren't trying to prove anything. Nathan shook his head again. No. Rachel looked toward the street where the confrontation had happened the night before. It's funny, she said quietly. What? I've lived in this neighborhood 5 years. Nathan listened, and I always told people it felt safe. Nathan understood what she meant. Rachel sighed. Now, I realize safety might just mean we haven't been tested yet. Nathan nodded slowly. That's usually what it means. Rachel glanced at him again. You seem comfortable with that idea. Nathan thought about it. Comfortable isn't the right word. What is? Accepting. Rachel tilted her head. Because of your daughter. Nathan nodded. When you're responsible for someone else, pretending the world is harmless stops working. Rachel looked thoughtful. I guess I never had to think about that. Nathan smiled slightly. You might someday. Rachel laughed softly. Maybe. A bus pulled up to the curb nearby, releasing a rush of commuters onto the sidewalk. The morning had fully started now. Rachel checked her watch. I should get to work. Nathan nodded. Where do you work? Design firm. Midtown. Nathan gestured vaguely downtown. Office building maintenance, not as glamorous. Rachel smiled. Important, though. Nathan shrugged. Someone has to keep the lights on. They began walking slowly down the block together again, though their paths would split at the next corner. Rachel seemed reluctant to end the conversation. There's one thing I'm still thinking about, she said. Nathan glanced at her. What's that? Rachel took a moment before answering. When you asked them to apologize. Nathan remembered. Yes. Rachel looked straight ahead as she spoke. That moment changed something. Nathan waited. Before that, they were just 3 guys messing with someone they thought was weaker. Nathan nodded. But when you made them say sorry, she turned to him, you made them acknowledge it. Nathan considered that. Rachel continued. And that's when the power shifted. Nathan hadn't thought of it exactly that way, but it felt accurate. Rachel reached the corner where their paths separated. She stopped. I'm glad my morning coffee spot is near your daughter's school, she said. Nathan smiled slightly. Small city. Rachel extended her hand. Nathan shook it. Take care, Nathan. You too. She turned and began walking toward the subway entrance. Nathan watched her for a second. Then he turned the opposite direction toward work. The streets were louder now. Traffic thicker. People faster. Yet as Nathan walked, Rachel's earlier words stayed with him. The scary part wasn't them. It was when nobody did anything. Nathan had spent years learning how to handle violence. But the truth was something else entirely. The hardest moment wasn't the fight. It was the quiet second before it. The place where someone decided whether they were going to step forward or keep walking. Nathan adjusted his jacket collar and continued down the street. Work waited. The city moved. But somewhere beneath the noise of the morning, he carried the quiet understanding that moments like that never really disappeared. They just waited, until the next time someone had to decide what kind of person they were going to be. Nathan didn't expect to see her again that evening. Days in the city usually folded into one another. Morning routines, work orders, subway noise, the constant motion that left little space for small connections to repeat themselves. But when he stepped out of the hardware store on Columbus after work, he noticed her almost immediately. Rachel stood near the corner outside a bookstore, scrolling through something on her phone. Nathan slowed without meaning to. She looked up at the same moment and recognized him just as quickly as he had recognized her. A brief look of surprise crossed her face. Then she smiled. Well, she said as he approached, this is starting to feel like a pattern. Nathan adjusted the strap of the small tool bag on his shoulder. Just coincidence. Rachel lifted an eyebrow. Twice in 24 hours? Nathan shrugged. New York's smaller than it looks. Rachel slipped her phone into her coat pocket. Finished with work? Nathan nodded. You? Just heading home. Nathan glanced down the block toward the direction of her building. The memory of the night before flickered through his mind. The sidewalk. The men. The tightness in her shoulders. She noticed the glance. "You don't have to escort me every time," she said with a faint smile. Nathan returned the smile. "I wasn't planning to." They stood there for a moment while pedestrians flowed around them. Then Rachel tilted her head slightly. "But you could walk part of the way." Nathan considered the distance. Emily would still be at a friend's house finishing a school project. He had an hour before picking her up. "Sure," he said. They started down the street together. The evening crowd had begun thickening again. People leaving offices, restaurant lights warming the sidewalks, taxis slowing near curbs to collect passengers. For a while, neither of them spoke. Nathan noticed something different about Rachel's posture tonight. More relaxed. The tightness from the previous night had faded. "You look less worried today," he said. Rachel glanced at him. "I slept." "That helps." "And I told a friend about what happened." Nathan looked at her. Rachel smiled faintly. "She said I was lucky. Someone stepped in." Nathan didn't respond. Rachel studied his face. "You don't like being described that way, do you?" Nathan thought about it. "It makes it sound unusual." Rachel laughed softly. "You're saying it shouldn't be unusual." Nathan nodded. They crossed another intersection. The air smelled faintly of roasted nuts from a street cart. Rachel tucked her hands into her coat pockets. "Can I ask you something honestly?" Nathan nodded. "Sure." "Were you angry at them?" Nathan considered the question carefully. "Not really." Rachel looked surprised. "They were harassing someone." "Yes." "And you weren't angry?" Nathan looked ahead at the passing traffic. "Anger makes things messy." Rachel thought about that. "So what were you feeling?" Nathan searched for the right word. "Focused." Rachel nodded slowly. "That sounds like something someone who trains a lot would say." Nathan chuckled quietly. "Probably." They walked another half block before Rachel spoke again. "I keep remembering the way you stood there." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "What about it?" "You weren't trying to scare them." "No. You were just present." Nathan looked at her briefly. "That's usually enough." Rachel seemed to roll that idea around in her mind. It worked. Sometimes it does. They passed a small park where a group of kids chased a soccer ball across the grass under dim lights. Rachel watched them for a second. "Your daughter plays anything like that?" Nathan shook his head. "She tried soccer once." "What happened?" "She spent most of the game helping the other team up when they fell." Rachel laughed. "That sounds like a good kid." Nathan nodded. "She is." They approached the familiar stretch of street leading toward Rachel's building again. Rachel slowed slightly. "You don't have to walk all the way again," she said. Nathan shrugged. "I'm already here." Rachel smiled. "You're stubborn." "Maybe." They reached the entrance. The same warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. Rachel stopped beside the door and turned toward him. "You know what the strange part is?" she said. Nathan waited. "I don't remember the faces of those guys very clearly anymore." Nathan understood. "But I remember you standing there." Nathan shifted the tool bag on his shoulder. "That's not the important part." Rachel shook her head gently. "It is to me." For a moment the sounds of the street faded into the background. Then Rachel said something that made Nathan pause. "You changed the way I see people." Nathan looked at her. "How?" Rachel thought about it. "Before that night I assumed people wouldn't help." Nathan didn't interrupt. Rachel continued. "Now I know at least one person will." Nathan let out a small breath. "That's a heavy standard." Rachel smiled. "You said it." Nathan didn't answer. Because he knew the truth was simpler. He hadn't stepped in to set an example. He had stepped in because the alternative would have stayed with him longer than the confrontation. Rachel opened the building door. "Good night, Nathan." "Good night." She paused just inside the doorway. Then she added quietly, "Tell Emily I said hello." Nathan nodded. The door closed softly. Nathan stood there for a moment under the streetlight. The city moved around him again. Cars. Voices. Footsteps. Life continuing the way it always did. After a few seconds, he turned and started walking toward Emily's friend's apartment. The night felt ordinary again, but the quiet understanding from the night before still rested somewhere inside him, not loud, not dramatic, just steady. The knowledge that sometimes the smallest decision a person makes is the one someone else remembers for the rest of their life. Nathan didn't walk straight home after leaving Rachel's building. His feet carried him toward the park first. It wasn't far, just a few blocks, but the open space helped him think when something lingered in his head. Years ago, when Emily was small enough to fall asleep on his shoulder, he used to push her stroller along these same paths after dinner. The park lights had just come on. Soft yellow circles stretched across the pathways. A few runners moved past in steady rhythm. Somewhere deeper inside the trees, a dog barked and someone called its name. Nathan sat on a bench near the edge of the path. For a few minutes he did nothing, just watched people move. A couple walked by holding hands. Two teenagers argued quietly over a shared pair of headphones. A man in a long coat paced slowly while talking into his phone. Normal pieces of life, the kind that pass unnoticed most days. Nathan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. Rachel's words from earlier stayed with him. "You changed the way I see people." He wasn't sure how he felt about that, because the truth was, he hadn't been thinking about changing anyone's view of the world. He had been thinking about his daughter, about the possibility, however small, that someday she might stand on a sidewalk like that. Nathan rubbed his hands together slowly. Training had taught him something important over the years. Violence rarely started with punches. It started with moments. Moments where people tested boundaries, where someone decided another person's comfort didn't matter. Most of the time, those moments faded away on their own. But sometimes they grew. Nathan knew that. And once something grew large enough, it became harder to stop without someone getting hurt. The three young men from the night before probably hadn't woken up that morning planning to harass someone. It likely started as a joke, then a comment, then another. Momentum. Nathan had seen it happen in dozens of small ways across the city. Momentum was easy. Responsibility was harder. A runner slowed near the bench to stretch. Nathan glanced up briefly. The runner nodded politely and continued down the path. The night air cooled slightly. Nathan checked his watch. Still a little time before picking up Emily. He leaned back against the bench and watched the trees sway gently above the path. The strange thing about training was that it never really left you. Even after years without stepping into a gym regularly, his body still noticed small details automatically. Footsteps approaching from behind. The rhythm of someone's breathing, where shadows moved when streetlights flickered. It wasn't fear, just awareness. Nathan sometimes wondered if that awareness made life heavier or lighter. Probably both. A group of kids rode past on scooters, laughing loudly as they zigzagged around each other. One of them nearly clipped the edge of the bench. Nathan lifted his feet just in time. "Sorry," the kid called over his shoulder. Nathan smiled faintly. The park quieted again. He thought about the moment Rachel asked him why he made the men apologize. At the time, the answer had felt simple. But sitting here now, Nathan realized it was more complicated. Apologies did something important. They forced a pause. A recognition. A moment where someone had to acknowledge another person existed. Without that pause, people drifted too easily into treating each other like obstacles. Or worse. Nathan stood from the bench. The city lights beyond the trees shimmered between branches. Time to pick up Emily. He left the park and walked toward the apartment building where her friend lived. The streets had grown busier again with evening traffic. Restaurant windows glowed warmly. A saxophone player stood near the subway entrance playing a slow melody that echoed off the buildings. Nathan climbed the steps of the building and pressed the buzzer. A small voice answered. "Hello, Nathan." The door buzzed open immediately. Emily burst down the hallway stairs before Nathan even reached the landing. "Dad!" She ran the last few steps and wrapped her arms around him quickly. "You're sweaty," Nathan said. "We were doing a volcano experiment." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "In an apartment?" Emily grinned. It overflowed a little. Nathan sighed. "I'm guessing their parents love you." They laughed. Nathan wasn't entirely convinced, but he let it go. They stepped back outside together. Emily walked beside him, swinging her backpack slightly. "Did you see the lady again?" she asked. Nathan glanced down. "Rachel?" "Yeah." Nathan nodded. Briefly, Emily seemed pleased. "She seemed nice." "She is." They walked a few steps in comfortable silence. Then Emily said something unexpected. "I told my friend about what you did." Nathan stopped walking for a second. "You did?" Emily nodded proudly. "Yeah." Nathan continued walking. "What did you tell them?" "That you helped someone." Nathan exhaled quietly. Emily looked up at him. "What?" Nathan shook his head. "Nothing. You're embarrassed." "A little." Emily smiled mischievously. "You shouldn't be." Nathan glanced down at her. "Why not?" Emily thought about that carefully before answering. "Because if nobody helps, things stay bad." Nathan looked ahead at the sidewalk stretching toward home. Rachel's words echoed again in his mind. The moment when nobody did anything. Emily kicked a loose pebble down the sidewalk. "Would you help someone again?" Nathan didn't answer right away, because the truth was that question never had a permanent answer. Every situation arrived differently. Every moment asked something new. But he knew the direction his feet would probably turn. Finally, he said quietly, "I hope I would." Emily nodded like that answer made sense. They reached their building and climbed the stairs together. Inside the apartment, the warm light from the kitchen wrapped around them again. Another evening, another ordinary moment. But as Nathan watched Emily drop her backpack and start talking about homework and volcano experiments, he understood something clearly. The real weight of the night before wasn't the confrontation. It was the quiet example sitting at the kitchen table now. Because someday Emily would face moments of her own, and the way Nathan handled his would shape what she believed people were supposed to do. Nathan moved toward the stove to start dinner. Outside, the city continued moving without noticing anything had changed. But inside their small apartment, something had shifted quietly. Not dramatic, not loud, just a deeper understanding settling into place. A few days passed before Nathan thought about the sidewalk again. Not because it had disappeared from his mind. It simply settled into the background, the way most events do when daily life fills the space around them. Morning routines, work orders, Emily's school schedule. The quiet rhythm of their apartment. The city kept moving, and Nathan moved with it. But sometimes small reminders surfaced. On Thursday evening, he was fixing a loose hinge in the building lobby where he worked. The door had been scraping against the frame for weeks. One of the tenants finally asked if it could be repaired. Nathan crouched beside the hinge with a screwdriver, turning the metal slowly until the alignment settled back into place. Behind him, two tenants walked through the lobby, arguing softly about a package delivery. Nathan barely listened. But the tone caught his attention. Not the words, just the way voices sometimes carry tension before anything else happens. He finished tightening the screw and stood. The door swung smoothly now. Problem solved. The two tenants were still talking, but the sharp edge in their voices had faded. One of them laughed awkwardly. Nathan wiped his hands on a cloth and walked toward the maintenance office. Small moments. They happened everywhere. Most passed quietly. Others grew. Nathan had learned to notice the difference. Later that evening, he picked Emily up from school. She walked beside him with unusual energy. "You know what happened today?" Nathan smiled slightly. "I'm guessing you're about to tell me." Emily nodded eagerly. "There was this boy in my class bothering a girl." Nathan listened carefully. "What kind of bothering?" "He kept taking her pencil." Nathan glanced down at her. "What did the teacher do?" Emily hesitated. "She didn't see." Nathan waited. "Emily kicked a small stone along the sidewalk. So I told him to stop." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "And?" He rolled his eyes. Nathan felt a familiar echo in that description. "What happened next?" Emily looked slightly embarrassed. "I told him if he didn't stop, I would tell the teacher." Nathan suppressed a smile. "Very strategic." Emily shrugged. He stopped. Nathan nodded slowly. They continued walking. After a moment, Emily asked, "Did I do the right thing?" Nathan thought about the question carefully. "You helped someone." Emily nodded. "But I was nervous." Nathan looked at her. "That's normal." Emily seemed relieved. They walked the rest of the block quietly. Nathan felt something settle inside his chest. Not pride exactly. Something quieter, understanding, because the example he had set on that sidewalk hadn't ended there. It had traveled home. Into conversations. Into small choices. Into the way a 12-year-old girl looked at the world. That realization carried more weight than the confrontation itself ever had. They reached their building and climbed the stairs together. Inside the apartment, Emily dropped her backpack on the chair and moved straight to the kitchen. "Can we have pasta tonight?" she asked hopefully. Nathan laughed softly. "Again? It's good." Nathan filled a pot with water. As the burner clicked on, Emily leaned against the counter watching him. "You know something?" she said. "What?" "I think people notice when someone helps." Nathan looked over his shoulder. "Why do you think that?" Emily shrugged. "Because the girl smiled at me." Nathan nodded. Sometimes that was all it took. A small moment. A quiet decision. A ripple moving outward farther than anyone expected. The water on the stove began to simmer. Outside the window, traffic moved steadily down the street. The city didn't slow for individual stories. It rarely noticed them at all. But Nathan understood something clearly now. Moments of courage didn't announce themselves. They arrived quietly, often disguised as inconvenience, or risk, or interruption. And the real measure of a person wasn't what they did during dramatic situations. It was what they chose in those quiet seconds when walking away was easier. Nathan stirred the pasta slowly. Emily sat at the counter doing homework. The small kitchen felt warm and steady. A normal evening. But Nathan knew something had changed inside him since that night on the sidewalk, not in the way people might expect. He didn't feel braver. He didn't feel stronger. If anything, he felt more aware of how fragile those moments were, because sometimes the difference between indifference and courage was only a few seconds long. And anyone at all, could stand inside that space. Nathan glanced at Emily as she concentrated on her homework. Then he looked back at the pot on the stove. The city outside continued its endless movement, but in that quiet kitchen, Nathan understood something simple. Helping someone hadn't made him extraordinary. It had simply reminded him what kind of person he hoped to remain, and what kind of example he wanted his daughter to carry forward. Later that night, the apartment grew quiet. Emily had finished her homework and fallen asleep on the couch halfway through a movie. The television still played softly, the light from the screen moving slowly across the walls. Nathan stood in the kitchen, rinsing the last plate. Water ran steadily over his hands. For a while he listened to the quiet sounds of the apartment, the refrigerator humming, the low dialogue from the television, Emily's slow breathing from the couch. Ordinary sounds. He dried the plate and set it in the rack. Then he turned off the water and walked into the living room. Emily had curled slightly onto her side, one arm tucked under the pillow, the other hanging loosely off the edge of the couch. The blanket had slipped down to her knees. Nathan lifted it gently and pulled it back over her shoulders. She didn't wake. For a moment he just stood there, watching her. Children slept with a kind of trust adults slowly forgot how to keep. Nathan reached for the remote and lowered the television volume. On the screen, two actors argued dramatically about something important to them, but distant from this quiet room. Nathan muted it entirely. Silence settled in. He sat down in the chair near the window. Outside, the city still moved. A bus passed slowly beneath the streetlight. Somewhere farther down the block, a car door slammed, the world continuing its long, steady rhythm. Nathan rested his hands on his knees. The memory of that night on the sidewalk returned again, but softer now. Not the shove, not the raised voices, just the moment before. The second, where he stopped walking, that was the part that stayed. Because nothing forced him to turn around. No one asked him. No one expected it. The city had already shown him what most people plan to do. Keep moving. Nathan leaned back in the chair and looked toward the ceiling. He understood those people. Truly. Everyone carried their own weight through the day. Jobs, bills, family worries, quiet fears that never showed on the outside. It was easier, sometimes necessary, to focus only on your own small circle. Nathan had done it himself more times than he could count. But sometimes something interrupted that pattern. A sound, a look, a small signal that someone needed help. Those were the moments that asked a question, and the question never sounded dramatic. It was usually simple. Are you going to pretend you didn't see that? Nathan rubbed his hands slowly together. He thought about the three young men again. Their faces had already started to blur in his memory. But he remembered the embarrassment when the moment shifted, when someone had refused to play along with the script they expected. Nathan hoped something stayed with them too. Not fear, just awareness. Sometimes a small interruption in a person's behavior stayed longer than punishment ever could. Across the room, Emily shifted slightly under the blanket. Nathan watched her. A few days ago, she had asked him a simple question while they walked home. Would you help someone again? At the time, he had answered carefully. I hope I would. The truth was more complicated. Helping someone always carried risk. Situations changed quickly. People made mistakes. Sometimes stepping in made things worse. Nathan knew all of that. But he also knew something else. If he had kept walking that night, the image of Rachel standing there alone would have followed him home anyway. Into the kitchen. Into conversations with Emily. Into the quiet moments before sleep. That kind of memory had weight. Nathan leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees again. He realized something while sitting there in the quiet apartment. Courage rarely felt dramatic from the inside. It didn't arrive with music or certainty. It usually showed up as discomfort, as inconvenience, as the quiet feeling that something wasn't right. The rest was just a decision. Nathan stood slowly and walked to the window. He looked down at the street below. Two people waited at the crosswalk. A cyclist passed. A taxi slowed, then continued on. Nothing unusual. But Nathan understood something clearly now. The city was full of moments like the one he had stepped into. Small crossroads, brief chances to interrupt something before it grew worse. Most people would never notice them. Others would notice and hesitate. A few would step forward. Nathan didn't think that made those people heroes. It simply meant they answered the question differently. Behind him, Emily stirred again. Nathan turned back toward the couch. She blinked awake slowly. Dad? Yeah. She rubbed her eyes. Did I fall asleep? Nathan smiled. Yeah. Emily sat up slightly, the blanket sliding down again. What time is it? Late. She yawned. I should go to bed. Nathan nodded. Emily stood and shuffled toward the hallway. Halfway there, she stopped and turned back. Hey, Dad? Yeah? She thought about something for a second. Then she said quietly, I'm glad you helped that lady. Nathan held her gaze. Me too. Emily nodded once and disappeared down the hallway. Nathan turned off the television. The apartment went dim except for the kitchen light. He stood there a moment longer before heading toward his own room. As he passed the window again, he glanced once more at the street outside. Cars. Footsteps. People moving through their nights, most of them carrying private stories no one else would ever see. Nathan knew something now that he hadn't understood quite as clearly before. The real power of a moment like that night on the sidewalk wasn't the fight. It wasn't the apology. It wasn't even the relief afterward. It was the quiet chain that followed. A woman who felt seen. A daughter who learned something about responsibility. A man who remembered the kind of person he wanted to be. Nathan turned off the kitchen light. The apartment fell fully into darkness. Outside, the city continued moving the way it always did. But somewhere inside that endless motion, small choices were being made every second. Most unnoticed, most forgotten. But sometimes, one of them changed the way someone looked at the world. And that was enough.